3:17 a.m. A billionaire's son was dying. 2 floors below, Tommy Underwood heard the screaming not from monitors, but from a mother's throat. The sound pierced through concrete and steel, identical to the sound his own mother had made 3 years ago when Maya stopped breathing. His hands tightened around his medical notebook. Room 823, 8th floor. Oliver Sterling convulsed for the 53rd time in 2 hours. 8 years old. Pharmaceutical empire heir. Access to the world's best doctors. None of it mattered now. Victoria Sterling collapsed against mahogany walls, expensive as coffins, just as useless. The Philips IntelliView monitor flashed red like a countdown to brain death. Her designer mascara streaked down her face as she whispered desperately, "Don't leave mommy, baby." "Last medication, gone," Nurse Jessica announced. 12 empty vials worth thousands, useless as water. Dr. Johnson. "Still in surgery, 1 hour minimum." 2 floors below, a black kid with a forbidden medical notebook knew the truth. 15 minutes until permanent brain damage. Would prejudice kill the miracle? 2 floors below, Tommy Underwood sat frozen on cracked plastic chair number 23, the sharp scent of Maya's asthma medication mixing with his own fear sweat. His sister slept fitfully beside him, each breath carrying that wheeze that turned his blood to ice. He stared at the $362 inhaler in his hands, the price of keeping Maya alive for 30 days. "Last time she turned blue because I miscalculated by 0.3 milligrams, he thought, fingers trembling with memory. I can't get it wrong again. Not ever. 3 years ago, he'd made a dosage error that nearly killed her. Maya had collapsed on their kitchen floor while he frantically rechecked his calculations, realizing his mistake could have stolen her life. The paramedic's words still haunted him. "Kid, 5 more minutes and we'd be talking about permanent brain damage." That night had shattered something inside him, not just fear, but the realization that love without knowledge was just another form of helplessness. His backpack didn't contain genius. It contained 134 pages of notes from watching Maya nearly die 6 times. Every protocol, every drug interaction, every warning sign he'd learned by watching her suffer. Not textbook theory, but brutal, practical experience earned in emergency rooms and midnight crises. Harold Washington's boots announced his approach like a judge's gavel. His eyes locked onto Tommy with practiced suspicion, sharpened by years of profiling. "What's your real game here, kid?" Harold's voice carried an edge. "I've worked security for 15 years. Know the crime statistics from your neighborhood. Kids your age don't carry medical textbooks unless they're planning something illegal." Tommy kept his voice carefully neutral, years of survival teaching him to make himself smaller. "My sister needs her inhaler refilled. We've been waiting since midnight." Harold's gaze swept over Tommy's worn clothes, his patched jacket, the Harrison's principal's spine barely visible. "Medical books? What are you really studying? How to forge prescriptions? How to identify drugs worth stealing from our pharmacy?" The accusation hung like poison in the air. Tommy looked up, meeting Harold's eyes with quiet dignity. "Harrison's Principles of Internal Medicine, page 1256. Acute respiratory emergencies. I memorized it because 3 years ago I watched my sister stop breathing and didn't understand what the doctors were saying. So I learned their language not to steal from them, but to save her when they couldn't be there." Harold's expression flickered with uncertainty. "Last month, Maya had an attack at 2 a.m., Tommy continued, his voice gaining strength. "Rescue inhaler empty. Couldn't afford the refill. I knew from experience, not textbooks, from watching her 6 previous crises, that I had maybe 8 minutes before her airways closed completely. So I used what I'd learned from necessity. Nebulized salt water, specific breathing techniques, positioning protocols I'd memorized from her previous hospitalizations. He opened his notebook to pages filled with dosage calculations written in his mother's handwriting alongside his own. These aren't theories from books. These are survival notes from keeping someone alive when the system says you're not worth saving. Harold stared at the desperate calculations covering every margin. Maya coughed that wet, rattling sound that made Tommy's stomach clench with recognition. Her fingernails were showing that telltale blue tinge, cyanosis, dropping oxygen saturation. He'd seen this pattern 5 times before. "Maya," he whispered, checking her pulse 132 beats per minute, elevated from respiratory distress. "Stay with me." 8 floors above, Victoria Sterling pressed trembling fingers against Italian marble, whispering to her reflection, "My company saves thousands of children worldwide. Why can't my billions save my own baby?" Her empire had revolutionized pediatric neurology. Her patents had earned fortunes. Her research had changed medicine. But standing here, watching machines keep her son alive, all that power felt like cruel cosmic irony. Tommy helped Maya sip water, his notebook falling open to emergency assessment protocols, written in his 13-year-old handwriting from the night he'd almost lost her. Harold's radio suddenly exploded. "All units! Medical emergency floor 8. Pediatric critical condition. Mother screaming for help." Tommy's head snapped toward the ceiling. Above them, a mother was making the exact sound his mother had made 3 years ago, the sound of watching your child slip toward death. He squeezed Maya's hand. "That could be us up there. That could be you." 2 families, 1 impossible night, and a choice that would reveal whether knowledge earned through suffering could triumph over prejudice. Money saves the world, but knowledge born from poverty saves children. Tommy's hands trembled as Harold's radio crackled with emergency updates from the 8th floor. Maya was deteriorating rapidly, that terrifying blue tinge spreading from her fingernails toward her lips. But somewhere above them, another child was dying in real time. His mind fractured between impossible choices. "They'll call me a threat because of my skin," he thought, chest tightening with memories of police stops and suspicious stares. But Maya taught me something stronger. Fear never saved anyone. Maya's breathing grew more labored, that high-pitched wheeze signaling dangerous airway narrowing. Tommy had heard this progression 5 times before. Each time, it ended with an ambulance or worse. "Tommy," Maya gasped, her voice barely audible. "Can't breathe." Her lips were turning blue. Oxygen saturation drops fast. Tommy knew from brutal experience what came next. Complete respiratory failure within minutes. He reached into his backpack for Maya's emergency epinephrine auto-injector, the one thing that could buy them time when her airways closed. His hands moved with practiced precision, pressing the device against her thigh through her jeans. "Hey! Stop!" Harold lunged forward, grabbing Tommy's wrist. "What are you doing to her?" "Epinephrine for acute bronchospasm," Tommy said urgently, not stopping his administration. "American Academy of Neurology guidelines, 0.3 milligrams intramuscular for severe respiratory distress." Harold's grip tightened. "You're injecting her with the medicine that keeps her alive." Tommy's voice gained desperate authority. "Watch her oxygen levels if you don't believe me." She's cyanotic, turning blue from hypoxia. Without this, her airways close completely in maybe 3 minutes. Harold hesitated, looking at Maya's blue-tinged face, then at Tommy's steady hands completing the injection with obvious experience. Maya's breathing began improving within seconds, the epinephrine opening her constricted airways just enough to prevent complete respiratory failure. You actually knew what you were doing," Harold said, releasing Tommy's wrist. 6 times I've had to do this," Tommy said quietly, disposing of the auto-injector in the proper sharps container he carried. 6 times I've watched her turn blue and knew I had minutes to save her or watch her die. Harold studied Tommy with a completely transformed understanding. Kid, where exactly did you learn emergency protocols? Tommy looked up from checking Maya's pulse, now stabilizing at 118 beats per minute. From watching her nearly die in room 412 3 years ago. From memorizing every word the paramedics said during her 5 ambulance rides. From sitting in emergency rooms like this one, listening to doctors explain treatments I couldn't afford but desperately needed to understand. He opened his notebook to pages covered with timestamps and symptom progressions. These aren't textbook theories. This is survival documentation from keeping someone alive when you're too poor for the system to care whether you live or die. Maya's breathing was improving, but Tommy's trained ear kept analyzing the radio chatter from above. The maternal desperation in those screams sounded exactly like his own mother 3 years ago. Harold, Tommy said quietly, what's the exact situation on floor 8? The guard's radio exploded with fresh panic. All units to VIP suite. Pediatric seizure patient 67th episode. Dr. Johnson still unavailable. Mother begging for any help. Tommy's medical experience kicked in automatically. 67 seizures means refractory status epilepticus. That child has maybe minutes before permanent brain damage. Harold stared. How could you diagnose that from a radio call? Because I've studied every emergency that kills children, Tommy said, his voice carrying hard-earned authority. Maya's respiratory crises taught me that when conventional medicine fails, you either find another way or watch them die. Maya gripped his hand with surprising strength. Tommy, if there's a dying child up there and you can help, you have to try, even if they see you as dangerous instead of a healer. The profound wisdom in her 12-year-old voice cut through his fear. Harold's radio crackled. Critical alert! All physicians unavailable! Any medical knowledge needed immediately. The elevator doors opened like the mouth of judgment itself. Through them came the sound of a mother's anguish, raw and desperate, exactly like the knife that had cut through his soul 3 years ago. Tommy stood, his body shaking with terror and determination. I'm a street medic, not a criminal, and that mother needs help I might be able to give. Prejudice kills faster than disease ever could. Tommy exploded through the door of room 823 like lightning breaking through darkness, his medical notebook clutched like a weapon against death itself. Turn him now 29 degrees or he dies! The words tore from his throat with desperate authority as he shoved past Harold's shocked grip. Victoria whirled around, her tear-streaked face twisting between hope and hysteria. Who are you? Security! I'm the person who knows how to save your son, Tommy declared, already lunging toward Oliver's violently convulsing body. The 8-year-old was trapped in his 68th seizure, small limbs rigid with contractions that defied nature. Jessica froze, her medical training colliding with institutional protocol. You cannot be in here. This is a sterile, 29 degrees lateral. Tommy's voice cut through the screaming monitors like a surgeon's blade. Not 30, not 25, 29 degrees stops aspiration death while maintaining airway integrity during prolonged seizure episodes. Each word was a bullet fired from 3 years of desperate study, knowledge earned in bookstore aisles and library corners, while Maya slept fitfully at home. Victoria stared at this impossible teenager who'd materialized like her last prayer answered. You actually know what you're doing? Status epilepticus continuous brain electrical storms lasting hours, Tommy said, approaching Oliver with the confidence of someone who'd memorized every protocol. Your son's neurons are literally burning themselves to death, minutes until permanent damage, maybe less. Harold lunged for Tommy's shoulder. Kid, hospital security requires, let him save my baby! Victoria's scream silenced the room, her mother's instinct overriding every logical barrier. Jessica's trembling hands followed Tommy's precise commands, repositioning Oliver's burning body while Tommy counted with the mechanical precision of someone who'd timed a sister's life-or-death episodes. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Oliver's body fought against itself, muscles locked in seizure patterns that seemed to tear his small frame apart. The Philips IntelliView monitor painted the room red with warnings, heart rate spiking toward cardiac arrest levels. 45 Mississippi, 46 Mississippi. Tommy's voice never wavered. Each second counted like a prayer to gods of medicine and mercy. 50 Mississippi. At exactly 51 seconds, Oliver's rigid convulsions began melting away like ice in sunlight. At 51 seconds, his violent shaking stopped completely. At 51 seconds, the room fell silent except for the sound of 4 people remembering how to breathe. "Jesus Christ," Jessica whispered, watching Oliver's oxygen levels climb from critical to stable. "His vitals are normalizing. How did you—" Victoria collapsed toward Oliver's bed, then spun and crushed Tommy in an embrace that felt like drowning in gratitude. "You saved him. Oh God, you saved my baby. Don't leave us. Promise me you won't leave." Tommy stood rigid in her arms, overwhelmed by unfamiliar appreciation from a woman whose monthly clothing budget probably exceeded his family's yearly income. "Ma'am, he's not safe yet." The seizure pattern indicates beep, beep, beep. The monitors exploded with new alarms. Oliver's temperature spiked like a rocket launching toward hell. 103.4, 103.9, 104.3 degrees Fahrenheit. "No!" Victoria's relief shattered like glass. "What's happening now?" Tommy's blood turned to ice as he recognized the complication that haunted his worst nightmares. Post-ictal hyperthermia. His brain is overheating from seizure damage. This is catastrophically worse than convulsions. Jessica checked the digital readout, her face draining of color. 104.7 and climbing exponentially. "How fast?" Tommy demanded, though terror was already answering. "At this trajectory, he'll hit 106 degrees within 6 minutes, Jessica said, her voice hollow with professional dread. That's brain death temperature." Harold looked between the medical crisis and the teenager who'd just performed a miracle. "Ma'am, should I call—" "There's nobody to call!" Victoria screamed, her CEO's composure exploding into maternal panic. "Every doctor is unavailable. Every specialist is across the city. My son is cooking to death right here, right now." Tommy's hands shook as he opened his notebook to theoretical protocols he'd studied obsessively but never dared attempt. "There's one possibility, but it's completely experimental, not in any medical textbook." Victoria grabbed his face with both hands. "Tell me what you need." "Hospital plants. Aloe from the main lobby, mint from the pediatric garden, basic medical supplies." Tommy's voice shifted into clinical overdrive as desperation focused his mind. "I can synthesize a dual-action compound, simultaneous seizure suppression and thermal regulation." "That's medically impossible," Jessica protested. "You can't treat neurological and thermal conditions with garden vegetation." Tommy met her disbelief with the confidence of someone who'd reverse-engineered pharmaceutical patents at 16. "Actually, you can. GABA receptor enhancement plus topical vasodilation. Same molecular base, different therapeutic applications." Oliver's temperature hit 105.1 degrees. His small body radiated heat like a dying star, sweat streaming down flushed cheeks. Victoria looked at her son's burning face, then at Tommy's determined eyes, then made the decision that would rewrite both their destinies. "Get everything. Jessica, help him. I don't care if it's experimental. I care that traditional medicine is failing my child." Harold stepped aside as Tommy raced toward the door, notebook clutched like a lifeline. "Kid," Harold called out, "you are absolutely certain about this?" Tommy paused at the threshold, 3 years of desperate study about to face its ultimate test on a billionaire's dying son. I'm certain about what happens if I don't try, he said, and that's unacceptable. The seizure stopped. But this was only the beginning. 3 years ago, Maya almost died in my arms, Tommy said, his voice cracking with memory that still bled fresh. Status asthmaticus like your son's seizures, but she was drowning in air she couldn't breathe. Victoria moved closer, studying this impossible teenager who'd materialized like answered prayer. Harold remained against the wall, his worldview quietly reshaping itself. I was 13, holding my sister's blue hand in room 412 downstairs while doctors spoke in code I couldn't break, Tommy continued, a memory flashing. Himself at 2 a.m., drawing brain diagrams on their kitchen table by flashlight while Maya coughed in the next room. Words like bronchospasm and hypoxemia might as well have been death sentences in a foreign language. He remembered her small voice cutting through the darkness. Tommy, keep studying. Learn this so you can save me forever. Oliver stirred slightly, his post-seizure confusion visible in fluttering eyelids. Tommy recognized the neurological reset brain pathways slowly reconnecting after electrical chaos. So what did you do? Victoria asked, her voice softer now. Tommy's eyes grew distant with painful precision. I read 134 medical textbooks in 18 months. Drew brain diagrams at 2 a.m. just to understand why my sister couldn't breathe. Memorized every emergency protocol that might save her next time. Not because I was smart, because I was terrified of being helpless again. A tired smile ghosted across his face. Maya was my professor. 6 major respiratory emergencies after that first hospital stay. Each crisis became a masterclass in reading symptoms, understanding treatments, knowing what doctors meant behind their careful words. He paused at a section dense with chemical structures. 51 different herbal combinations tested over 2 years. Not to replace her prescription inhaler, nothing could match that, but to bridge the gaps when poverty made medicine a luxury we couldn't afford. Victoria's expression shifted from amazement to something approaching reverence. You actually created working medications from garden plants. Basic bronchodilators, Tommy said with scientific humility. Mint for menthol, honey for anti-inflammatory properties, and 3 other herbs I cultivated in apartment windows. Same therapeutic principles as commercial drugs, just gentler and slower acting. He looked directly at Victoria. But here's the truth. I also improved your company's formula, Project SP4629. I reverse-engineered it from your patent filing and made it work because Maya couldn't wait for Big Pharma to decide poor kids were worth saving. Victoria stared in stunned recognition. Your researchers missed the cooling component entirely, Tommy continued. I added it because I'd watched Maya seize during severe attacks. I knew temperature management was critical. Oliver's eyes opened briefly, swimming with post-ictal confusion as his young brain slowly rebuilt connections. Harold started with transformed understanding. Kid, you've been walking around with medical knowledge that could save lives? Tommy shrugged with genuine modesty. Knowledge felt more useful than helplessness. Maya taught me the most expensive university in the world is watching someone you love fight for every breath. But Oliver's monitors suddenly shrieked new warnings. Temperature spiking again, 103.8, 104.2, 104.5 degrees. 2 minutes until brain damage, Jessica whispered. Tommy looked at Victoria. I have to try. For love. Siblings are the most expensive university in the world. Oliver's eyes closed again, but his breathing remained steady. Tommy recognized the signs of natural post-ictal recovery, the body's way of healing from neurological trauma. It should have been reassuring. Then the monitors began screaming again. Oliver's body went rigid for the 63rd time. This seizure was different, stronger, more violent than any before. The positioning that had helped minutes earlier wasn't enough now. His small body arched against the bed restraints with impossible force that seemed to defy physics for an 8-year-old child. "Get Dr. Johnson," Victoria said desperately, but Jessica was already shaking her head with professional resignation. "Still in surgery. Complex trauma case. At least another 40 minutes minimum." Tommy studied Oliver's convulsions with clinical precision, recognizing the dangerous escalation pattern that haunted his nightmares. Each seizure was more severe than the last, with progressively shorter recovery intervals between episodes. Classic progression toward refractory status. Epilepticus, the kind that killed children when conventional medicine failed. "We can't wait 40 minutes, Tommy said urgently, his voice cutting through the monitor alarms. His brain can't survive much more electrical damage without permanent neurological impairment. Victoria turned to him with desperate eyes that reflected every parent's worst nightmare. "What exactly do you mean by permanent damage?" "Prolonged seizure activity causes massive neuronal death," Tommy explained, his words coming faster as urgency mounted. "Think of it like a brain-lock glutamate acts as the key that opens channels. GABA is the lock that should close them. When the lock breaks, electrical storms rage unchecked. The medical concept simplified through metaphor making complex neurochemistry understandable in crisis moments." "Can you actually help him?" Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible above the electronic chaos. Tommy looked at Oliver's convulsing form, then at his notebook filled with theoretical protocols, then back at Victoria's tear-streaked face. "I might be able to, but not with conventional medications. You'd have to trust me with something that's not in any standard medical textbook." "Tell me what you need." Tommy's mind raced through experimental combinations he'd studied but never dared attempt. "Aloe plant from your main lobby, fresh mint from the third-floor pediatric garden, standard saline solution from medical supplies. I can create a dual-action compound. Aloe blocks the electrical storms. Mint cools the fever fires." Jessica looked skeptical, her medical training warring with what she'd already witnessed. "You seriously want to treat life-threatening seizures with garden plants?" "Not directly," Tommy said, opening his notebook to pages covered with hand-drawn molecular diagrams. "The bioactive compounds enhance GABA function, your body's natural lock system. When properly concentrated, they can stop electrical storms." Victoria stared at the precise chemical structures drawn with scientific accuracy. "Tommy, how do you know neurochemistry is this advanced?" "Because I've knelt beside Maya's bed every night for 3 years begging her to keep breathing," Tommy said quietly. "You're kneeling for your son now." "I understand that desperation." Oliver's seizure intensified dramatically. The monitors showed his heart rate climbing toward dangerous arrhythmia levels, 165 beats per minute and still rising. "How long would compound preparation take?" Victoria asked, her CEO instincts calculating time against catastrophe. 15 minutes for synthesis, maybe less if I can access the plants quickly, but..." Tommy hesitated, the weight of legal implications suddenly clear. "There's no doctor here to authorize experimental treatment. If I'm wrong about the dosages, if anything goes wrong during administration, I could face serious criminal charges. Are you absolutely certain about this decision?" Victoria studied Tommy's face, this impossible teenager who'd already saved her son once through knowledge that defied explanation. Then she did something that would shock her board of directors and redefine her understanding of power. She dropped to her knees beside Tommy's chair. "Please," she whispered. A billionaire begging a teenager, tears streaming down her face. "Please save my baby. I don't care about your background or your age or what society says about you. You're the only person in this hospital who knows how to help him." Tommy stared at this powerful woman kneeling before him, designer clothes wrinkled, corporate pride abandoned for pure maternal desperation. The image burned itself into his memory, proof that love could level every social barrier. "Mrs. Sterling, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," she said with absolute conviction. "Because I abandoned Project SP-4629 for profit margins. You completed it for love. That makes you wiser than everyone in my company combined." Her voice cracked with confession. "I chose shareholders over sick children. You chose your sister over everything. I need you to teach me what real medicine looks like." Harold's radio crackled with distant hospital emergencies. "Security to ER, overdose situation, need immediate backup." "I have to respond," Harold said reluctantly, looking between Victoria and Tommy. "Ma'am, are you absolutely certain?" "Go," Victoria commanded, still on her knees. "Handle your emergency." After Harold left, Victoria stood and stepped closer to Tommy with newfound respect. That healing garden wasn't randomly placed. Sterling Pharmaceuticals funded it for therapeutic plant research. You're not stealing ingredients, you're using resources my company provided but abandoned. Tommy stared at her with growing understanding. "You knew about the medicinal properties?" "We documented everything, then shelved it when synthesis costs couldn't maximize quarterly earnings," Victoria said bitterly. "You proved we were looking at the wrong metrics. Healing matters more than profit." Oliver's temperature began climbing again as they spoke, the digital readouts painting an increasingly dire picture. 103.8, 104.1, 104.3 degrees and rising steadily. "We need to move right now," Tommy said urgently, gathering his notebook. "Every second counts." "Tommy," Victoria said, grabbing his shoulders with desperate intensity. "If this works, if you save my son with garden medicine, I'm going to transform Sterling Pharmaceuticals. The Maya Medical Initiative will have unlimited funding, Stanford Medical School, full scholarship, whatever you need." "And if it doesn't work?" Victoria's voice carried the absolute certainty of a mother who'd found her last hope. "Then we tried everything possible. But I believe in you because love taught you better than any medical school could." They ran toward the elevator together, a billionaire CEO and a teenage nobody, united by a dying child and the impossible belief that love could triumph over every institutional barrier. Jessica called after them, "Tommy, wait! Security just radioed police are coming to investigate the suspicious teenager giving unauthorized medical treatment." Tommy paused at the elevator, his body caught between fear and determination. "Tell them I'm either saving a child or I'm not. Either way, I have to try." Behind them, Oliver's monitors showed his temperature climbing relentlessly toward 105 degrees. Victoria pressed the elevator button, then looked at Tommy with fierce protectiveness. "If the police come for you, they come through me first." The elevator doors opened. Through the hospital windows, red and blue lights flashed in the parking lot, police responding to security's call about an unidentified minor practicing medicine. Tommy stepped into the elevator anyway. "Let's get those plants before prejudice kills your son." Sometimes a mother's instinct knows what science cannot prove. Oliver's eyes closed again, but his breathing remained steady. Tommy recognized the signs of natural post-ictal recovery, the body's way of healing from neurological trauma. It should have been reassuring. Then the monitors began screaming again. Oliver's body went rigid for the 63rd time. This seizure was different, stronger, more violent than any before. The positioning that had helped minutes earlier wasn't enough now. His small body arched against the bed restraints with impossible force that seemed to defy physics for an 8-year-old child. "Get Dr. Johnson," Victoria said desperately, but Jessica was already shaking her head with professional resignation. "Still in surgery. Complex trauma case. At least another 40 minutes minimum." Tommy studied Oliver's convulsions with clinical precision developed from watching Maya's 6 respiratory crises, recognizing the dangerous escalation pattern that haunted his nightmares. Each seizure was more severe than the last, with progressively shorter recovery intervals between episodes. Classic progression toward refractory status epilepticus, the kind that killed children when conventional medicine failed. "We can't wait 40 minutes. Tommy said urgently, his voice cutting through the monitor alarms. His brain can't survive much more electrical damage without permanent neurological impairment. Victoria turned to him with desperate eyes that reflected every parent's worst nightmare. What exactly do you mean by permanent damage? Prolonged seizure activity causes massive neuronal death, Tommy explained, his words coming faster as urgency mounted. Think of it like a brain-lock glutamate acts as the key that opens channels, flooding cells with calcium. GABA is the lock mechanism that should close them, shutting down the electrical cascade. When the lock breaks, unchecked storms rage through neural pathways, killing cells with each surge. The medical concept simplified through metaphor making complex neurochemistry understandable in crisis moments. "Can you actually help him?" Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible above the electronic chaos. Tommy looked at Oliver's convulsing form, then at his notebook filled with theoretical protocols earned through Maya's suffering, then back at Victoria's tear-streaked face. "I might be able to, but not with conventional medications. You'd have to trust me with something that's not in any standard medical textbook. Tell me what you need." Tommy's mind raced through experimental combinations he'd studied, but never dared attempt on a living patient. Aloe plant from your main lobby. Fresh mint from the third-floor pediatric garden. Standard saline solution from medical supplies. I can create a dual-action compound. Aloe blocks the electrical storms by enhancing natural GABA production. Mint cools the fever fires through vasodilation. Jessica looked skeptical, her medical training warring with what she'd already witnessed. "You seriously want to treat life-threatening seizures with garden plants?" "Not directly," Tommy said, opening his notebook to pages covered with hand-drawn molecular diagrams copied from pharmaceutical patents. "The bioactive compounds enhance GABA receptor function, your body's natural lock system. When properly concentrated and combined, they can stop electrical storms more effectively than some synthetic drugs." Victoria stared at the precise chemical structures drawn with scientific accuracy that shouldn't exist in a 16-year-old's notebook. "Tommy, how do you know neurochemistry is this advanced? This is doctoral-level pharmacology." "Because I've knelt beside Maya's bed every single night for 3 years begging her to keep breathing," Tommy said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 desperate prayers. "You're kneeling for your son now." "I understand that desperation better than anyone." Oliver's seizure intensified dramatically. The monitors showed his heart rate climbing toward dangerous arrhythmia levels, 165 beats per minute, and still rising toward cardiac arrest territory. "How long would compound preparation take?" Victoria asked, her CEO instincts calculating time against catastrophe. 15 minutes for synthesis, maybe 12 if I can access the plants immediately." "But—" Tommy hesitated, the weight of legal implications suddenly crushing. "There's no doctor here to authorize experimental treatment. If I'm wrong about the dosages, if anything goes wrong during administration, I could face serious criminal charges for practicing medicine without a license. Are you absolutely certain about this decision?" Victoria studied Tommy's face. This impossible teenager who'd already saved her son once through knowledge that defied every expectation. Then she did something that would shock her board of directors and fundamentally redefine her understanding of true power. She dropped to her knees beside Tommy's chair. "Please," she whispered, a billionaire CEO begging a poor black teenager, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. "Please save my baby. I don't care about your background or your age or what society says about you. You're the only person in this entire hospital who knows how to help him." Tommy stared at this impossibly powerful woman kneeling before him, designer Chanel suit wrinkled, corporate pride completely abandoned for pure maternal desperation. The image burned itself into his memory, living proof that love could level every social barrier ever constructed. "Mrs. Sterling, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," she said with absolute conviction, her voice raw with confession. Because I abandoned Project SP4629 to maximize profit margins. You completed it for love. That makes you wiser than everyone in my billion-dollar company combined." Her voice cracked with bitter self-awareness. "I chose shareholders over sick children." "You chose your sister over everything else in your life. I need you to teach me what real medicine looks like." Harold's radio crackled with distant hospital emergencies requiring immediate security response. "Security to ER, possible overdose situation, need backup immediately." "I have to respond to that emergency," Harold said reluctantly, looking between Victoria kneeling and Tommy sitting. "Ma'am, are you absolutely certain about—" "Go!" Victoria commanded, still on her knees before a teenager. "Handle your emergency." After Harold left, Victoria stood and stepped closer to Tommy with newfound respect, bordering on reverence. That healing garden wasn't randomly placed throughout the hospital. Sterling Pharmaceuticals funded it specifically for therapeutic plant research. You're not stealing ingredients. You're using resources my company provided but then abandoned when they couldn't generate quarterly earnings. Tommy stared at her with a growing understanding of the bitter irony. "You knew about the medicinal properties all along?" "We documented everything extensively, then shelved the entire program when synthesis costs couldn't maximize profit per dose," Victoria said with self-disgust. "You proved we were measuring success with the wrong metrics entirely. Healing matters infinitely more than profit." Oliver's temperature began climbing again as they spoke, the digital readouts painting an increasingly dire picture of approaching brain death. 103.8, 104.1, 104.3 degrees, and rising steadily toward the threshold of permanent damage. "We need to move right now," Tommy said urgently, gathering his notebook with hands that trembled slightly. "Every second we delay increases the risk of irreversible neurological damage." "Tommy," Victoria said, grabbing his shoulders with desperate intensity that bordered on pain, "if this works, if you save my son with garden medicine worth $12, I'm going to completely transform Sterling Pharmaceuticals. The Maya Medical Initiative will have unlimited funding. Stanford Medical School, full scholarship, whatever you need to revolutionize accessible medicine." "And if it doesn't work? If I fail?" Victoria's voice carried the absolute certainty of a mother who'd found her last fragile hope. "Then we tried everything humanly possible together. But I believe in you because love taught you better medicine than any institution ever could." They ran toward the elevator together, a billionaire CEO and a teenage nobody, united by a dying child and the impossible belief that love could triumph over every institutional barrier ever constructed by wealth and prejudice. Jessica called after them urgently, "Tommy, wait! Security just radioed police are coming to investigate reports of a suspicious teenager giving unauthorized medical treatment." Tommy paused at the elevator threshold, his body caught between paralyzing fear and burning determination. "Tell them I'm either saving a child's life or I'm not. Either way, I have to try." Behind them, Oliver's monitors showed his temperature climbing relentlessly toward 105 degrees, the point of no return. Victoria pressed the elevator button, then looked at Tommy with fierce maternal protectiveness. "If the police come for you, they go through me first." The elevator doors opened. Through the hospital's floor-to-ceiling windows, red and blue lights flashed in the parking lot police cruisers responding to security's call about an unidentified minor practicing medicine without authorization. Tommy stepped into the elevator anyway, choosing courage over safety. "Let's get those plants before prejudice kills your son." Sometimes a mother's instinct knows what science cannot prove. Tommy and Jessica sprinted through hospital corridors like runners in a race against death. The aloe plant in the lobby waited exactly where Tommy remembered, a massive specimen with thick, succulent leaves that might save a billionaire's dying son. "How do you know which part contains the medicine?" Jessica gasped as Tommy broke off the largest leaves with surgical precision. "The clear gel holds the highest concentration of healing compounds," Tommy explained, working with practiced efficiency. But avoid the yellow latex layer, those chemicals could cause fatal complications. They commandeered elevator number 2 to the third-floor therapeutic herb garden. Tommy had discovered this medicinal sanctuary during Maya's darkest hospitalizations, a living pharmacy chosen specifically for healing properties. The mint plants flourished under grow lights, leaves glowing with essential oils Tommy desperately needed. He selected only the youngest growth, knowing it contained peak concentrations of life-saving compounds. 11 minutes. They raced back to room 823 in 11 minutes flat. Tommy had begun extracting aloe gel and crushing mint leaves when Oliver's monitors exploded with the sound of impending doom. The child was seizing again, his 64th episode, but this time brought a complication that turned urgent into impossible. Oliver's temperature spiked like a missile, 104.3, 104.6, 104.9 degrees Fahrenheit. "Critical hyperthermia!" Jessica screamed, her composure shattering. 105 degrees Fahrenheit, 6 minutes until brain damage. Tommy's blood turned to ice as the digital countdown flashed in his mind like a neon death sentence. Oliver now faced 2 fatal conditions simultaneously: brain electrical storms and cooking temperatures that would fry his neurons. "How fast is it climbing?" Tommy asked, though terror in Jessica's eyes was already screaming the answer. 105.2 degrees and rising exponentially. Jessica's voice cracked. "His brain will cook itself dead in exactly 6 minutes. Countdown. 5 minutes, 43 seconds. Tommy's mind exploded into overdrive, calculating risks that could save or damn a child. "I have to modify the compound completely. Add emergency fever reduction to seizure management." "That's medically impossible," Jessica protested. "You can't treat dual crises with garden plants." Tommy grabbed 2 81-milligram aspirin tablets, hands shaking as he crushed them into precise powder. "Adding salicylic acid for rapid temperature reduction, but if I miscalculate by even milligrams, I could kill him instead of saving him." Jessica stared in horror. "You're completely insane." Tommy's hands stilled, memories of Maya's worst crisis flooding back. "Either I try this, or another child dies while I watch helplessly." His voice gained steel determination. 3 years ago, Maya was exactly like this. Burning up, seizing, dying while I stood there useless. His eyes blazed with desperate purpose. "I'm not letting another child burn to death on my watch." Victoria burst through the door, having heard catastrophic monitor alarms. "What's happening to my baby?" "Dual medical crisis," Tommy said grimly, working faster as Oliver's temperature hit 105.4 degrees. "Seizures plus hyperthermia. I'm creating an experimental combination treatment, but..." He looked directly into Victoria's terrified eyes. "One wrong measurement, and I kill your son trying to save him." Countdown. 3 minutes, 18 seconds. Temperature climbed relentlessly. 105.5, 105.6, 105.7 degrees. Tommy spread materials across the bedside table: aloe gel, crushed mint, powdered aspirin, saline solution. His hands moved with desperate precision, measuring ratios he'd calculated theoretically but never tested on a living child. "The compound has to be mathematically perfect," he muttered, sweat streaming. "Too little aspirin, fever cooks his brain. Too much salicylic acid, he dies from toxicity." Jessica watched in fascination and terror. "You're gambling with his life on garden medicine." "I'm fighting for his life with everything I know," Tommy corrected fiercely. "There's a universe of difference." Countdown. 1 minute, 32 seconds. Tommy completed final mixing, creating pale green compound representing 3 years of desperate study compressed into one impossible gamble. The mixture carried sharp mint scent blended with hope distilled into medicine. "It's ready," Tommy announced, holding up experimental gel that would either save Oliver Sterling or kill him. Victoria looked at the untested compound, then at her son's fever-flushed face, then at Tommy's determined eyes. "Do it. Save my baby." Tommy applied the compound to Oliver's burning temples and wrists with hands that refused to shake. The fever would either break or explode beyond any hope of survival. 8 minutes, 2 problems, 1 impossible solution. Tommy's hands moved with the precision of a master alchemist, though he'd never worked in a billion-dollar laboratory or held a pharmaceutical patent. 3 life-saving compounds needed to be synthesized simultaneously, each serving a critical purpose, all designed to work in perfect harmony within Oliver's dying system. "Think of this mixture like a brain shield," Tommy explained to Jessica and Victoria as he worked with desperate focus, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd calculated these ratios 1,000 times in his head. "The aloe blocks the electrical lightning storms tearing through his neurons. The mint extinguishes the fever fires cooking his brain tissue, and the aspirin creates rapid cooling channels through his bloodstream." Victoria watched in mesmerized fascination as Tommy measured each component with mathematical precision that would have impressed her company's PhD chemists. "You're making this sound almost elegant." "Maya taught me that the most powerful medicine should be elegant," Tommy said, his voice steady despite the life-or-death stakes. "Simple enough for desperate families to understand, cheap enough for anyone to afford, effective enough to save lives that billion-dollar medications can't touch." He held up the pale green compound, which seemed to shimmer with concentrated hope and 3 years of accumulated knowledge. "This represents everything I've learned from watching my sister fight for every breath, but the total material cost is $12.37. Jessica checked Oliver's temperature, still climbing toward brain death levels at 105.6 degrees. "How can $12 worth of garden plants compete with our most advanced seizure medications?" Tommy began applying the compound to Oliver's burning temples and wrists with hands that moved like a conductor orchestrating salvation. Because sometimes the most revolutionary solutions are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone desperate enough to find them and brave enough to try them. The room fell into cathedral silence, except for the frantic symphony of medical monitors. Everyone held their breath as the experimental treatment began its impossible work against time and biology. 1 minute passed. Oliver's temperature held steady at the edge of catastrophe. 2 minutes. Still no change, but no worsening either. At 3 minutes and 18 seconds, something miraculous began happening. Oliver's fever started breaking like a dam bursting in reverse. 105.4, 105.0, 104.6, 104.2. "Jesus Christ, it's actually working," Jessica whispered, unable to believe the readings on her instruments. But Tommy wasn't celebrating yet. His trained eyes were monitoring Oliver's seizure patterns, waiting for the neurological component to take effect and stop the electrical storms. At 4 minutes and 12 seconds, Oliver's violent convulsions began weakening. At 4 minutes and 41 seconds, they stopped completely. The silence was deafening. Victoria collapsed into her chair, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son's vital signs stabilize for the first time in 8 hours of hell. "Fever dropping rapidly," Jessica reported, her voice cracking with professional amazement. 102.8, 101.5, 100.9. This is medically unprecedented. Tommy continued monitoring Oliver's neurological responses, his notebook open to pages of theoretical calculations that had just saved a life. "The compound is performing exactly as I hypothesized. Aloe alkaloids suppressing seizure cascade, mint providing rapid thermal regulation, aspirin enhancing circulatory cooling." Victoria studied the molecular diagrams in Tommy's notebook, her pharmaceutical empire founder's instincts recognizing something that should have been impossible. "Tommy, these exact formulas. I've seen this precise research methodology before." Tommy's hands stilled over his monitoring equipment. "What do you mean?" Project SP-4629, Victoria said slowly, her voice gaining strength with each word of recognition. This is the exact compound combination my company spent 3 years and $47 million developing. The precise ratios, the specific plant selections, the dual-action therapeutic approach. This is our abandoned research brought back to life. Tommy met her gaze with unflinching honesty. I know exactly what it is. Victoria stood, her CEO instincts fully engaged and blazing. You deliberately reverse-engineered our proprietary research. I didn't just reverse-engineer it, Tommy said with quiet pride that carried no arrogance. I completed it. Your research team missed the most critical component: integrated hyperthermia management. They focused on seizure suppression but completely ignored fever complications. That's why SP-4629 failed every clinical trial. Victoria stared at him in stunned recognition of genius disguised as desperation. I took your abandoned formula and made it actually work, Tommy continued, his voice growing stronger. Because Maya taught me that science should serve suffering people, not stockholder profit margins. Your company gave up because commercial synthesis was cost prohibitive. I made it work with plants growing in hospital gardens. Oliver's temperature continued its miraculous descent. 100.1, 99.8. 99.3. $12.37, Victoria whispered, looking at her son's peacefully breathing form. You saved my child with $12 worth of materials that my $47 million research division couldn't successfully synthesize for mass production. Tommy closed his notebook with the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd just proven love could outsmart corporate laboratories. Maya taught me the most important lesson about medicine. It doesn't matter how brilliant your science is if desperate families can't access it when death is knocking on their door. Jessica was conducting comprehensive neurological assessments, her amazement growing with each positive response. Reflexes are normal, cognitive function intact, pupils are equal and reactive. This is a complete medical miracle. At 6 minutes and 33 seconds after application, Oliver's fever reached 99.1 degrees, perfectly normal. At 7 minutes and 14 seconds, his eyes fluttered open like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Mommy, Oliver said softly, his voice hoarse but beautifully clear. Why does everyone look scared? And why do I feel like I've been sleeping for days? Victoria burst into tears of pure relief, taking her son's small hand in both of hers. You're okay, baby. You're completely okay. Dr. Johnson arrived at that exact moment, having finally completed his emergency surgery. He found Oliver sitting up in bed, alert and asking for chocolate milk, a complete transformation from the child who'd been dying of refractory status epilepticus just minutes before. I don't understand what I'm witnessing here, Dr. Johnson said after reviewing Oliver's charts and examining the green compound residue. Status epilepticus cases this severe typically require intensive pharmaceutical interventions lasting weeks. The fact that he's conscious, communicative, and neurologically intact after what his brain endured. He shook his head in 15 years of professional bewilderment. This recovery defies every medical precedent I know. Tommy was quietly packing his notebook when heavy, authoritative footsteps echoed down the hallway. Through the doorway, 2 Boston police officers approached with grim expressions, deep in conversation with Harold about unauthorized medical procedures and potential criminal charges. Oliver's fever had dropped from 105.6 degrees to 99.0 degrees in exactly 4 minutes and 11 seconds. His seizures had stopped completely. His brain function remained intact. But through the doorway, police officers were preparing arrest warrants. The formula Victoria's company abandoned 3 years ago had just saved her son's life. Dr. Johnson stood at the foot of Oliver's bed, staring at medical charts that documented the impossible, his 15 years of pediatric emergency medicine unable to process what he was witnessing. I've never seen recovery this rapid from refractory status epilepticus, he said, voice carrying professional awe. Complete neurological restoration in under 10 minutes? This defies everything I know about seizure medicine. Tommy remained quietly beside the bed, worn notebook under his arm, watching Oliver color dinosaurs as if the last 8 hours of crisis had been an afternoon nap. Victoria stepped forward, her transformation from desperate mother to visionary CEO blazing with purpose. Dr. Johnson, I want comprehensive documentation of this treatment. Every measurement, every component, every step. Ma'am, while I appreciate the miraculous results, experimental treatments require— Tommy, Victoria interrupted, turning to face him with eyes burning with gratitude. Stanford Medical School. Full scholarship, room, board, research stipend. I'm making the call in 1 hour. Tommy stared in stunned disbelief. Mrs. Sterling, I don't understand. I'm also establishing the Maya Medical Initiative immediately, Victoria continued, voice gaining power. A research foundation dedicated to affordable, plant-based pediatric treatments. Free medications for your sister for life, premium health care for your family, unlimited research funding. The police officers reappeared at the doorway, but their expressions had changed completely. Officer Martinez was holding his phone, showing a video that had already gone viral. Mr. Underwood, Martinez said, his tone respectful now. Someone recorded security footage of what happened here tonight. It's everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. The public is demanding we release you as a hero, not arrest you as a criminal. Tommy looked confused. What video? Martinez turned his phone around. The footage showed Tommy bursting into room 823, Victoria on her knees begging him for help. The moment Oliver's seizures stopped, the compound, preparation, everything. 12 million views in 3 hours, Martinez said. Comments are calling you the street medicine miracle. People are demanding we give you a medal, not handcuffs. Victoria smiled through fresh tears. The world sees what I see, Tommy. A healer who cares more about saving lives than following rules that fail people. Harold appeared, expression transformed from suspicion to pride. Ma'am, his sister's asking for him. Should I bring her up? Tommy's heart jumped. Maya's okay? Jessica wheeled Maya into the VIP room, the 12-year-old looking healthier than in years. Her breathing was clear, color vibrant, eyes bright. Tommy! Maya reached for him. Tommy rushed to her, and for the first time in 3 years, when Maya hugged him fiercely, he wasn't listening for wheezing. She was breathing freely, deeply, beautifully. Maya, you look amazing, he whispered, voice thick with relief. Like I can breathe for the first time forever, she said, then noticed Oliver coloring at his bed. Is that the boy you saved? Oliver looked up curiously. Are you Tommy's sister? He told me he learned medicine just to help you breathe. That's right, Maya beamed, then looked back at Tommy with radiant pride. And now he helped you too. The two children, one from poverty, one from privilege, smiled at each other with the pure joy of kids who didn't understand the barriers adults had built between them. Two children breaking class barriers with smiles. Victoria watched this moment, understanding finally clicking. Maya, your brother's going to Stanford Medical School this fall, and you'll receive the finest care for life, completely free. Maya's eyes filled with joyful tears. Really? Tommy gets to be a real doctor? He already is, Victoria said softly. Dr. Johnson was studying the viral video on his own phone. Tommy, medical schools across the country are calling the hospital. They all want you. 6 months later, Tommy Underwood walked across Stanford's campus carrying that same patched backpack, but everything had transformed. Maya breathed freely with revolutionary medications costing families nothing. The same compound Tommy had created that night, now mass-produced at cost. Oliver Sterling grew up healthy, playing soccer with newfound friends from all economic backgrounds. His mother had enrolled him in public school, teaching him that wealth meant nothing without compassion. The Maya Medical Initiative had saved over 10,000 children in its first 6 months, all thanks to $12.37 worth of garden plants that proved love could revolutionize medicine. Dr. Johnson became a national advocate for recognizing medical knowledge from unconventional sources, completely transforming how emergency medicine valued practical experience over institutional credentials. Victoria Sterling rebuilt her pharmaceutical empire on new principles: healing first, profit second. Her stock price initially dropped, then soared when the world embraced medicine that actually cared about people. Harold Washington became head of Stanford Medical School security, personally ensuring that brilliant minds from forgotten neighborhoods received protection instead of suspicion. The viral video reached 200 million views, sparking a global movement demanding accessible health care. Comments flooded in from people sharing their own knowledge that had saved lives. CPR learned from YouTube, first aid from library books, medical wisdom passed down through generations of necessity. Tommy still volunteered at Mercy General's free clinic monthly, teaching kids that their knowledge, however they learned it, could save the world. Sometimes one story's end is just another miracle's beginning. Share this if your knowledge, no matter where you learned it, could save someone's life. 6 months later, Tommy Underwood became Stanford Medical School's youngest pre-med student in the university's 130-year history. He still carried that same worn backpack with 3 carefully sewn patches, a quiet reminder that brilliance doesn't require privilege, just determination and desperate love. Maya breathed freely for the first time in her 12 years of life, her lungs finally working the way they were always meant to. The revolutionary inhaler Tommy developed through the Maya Medical Initiative synthesized from the same garden plants that saved Oliver worked better than anything Big Pharma had produced in 50 years. And it cost struggling families absolutely nothing. Oliver Sterling celebrated his 9th birthday playing competitive soccer, laughing with friends, completely unaware that the dangerous kid in the patched jacket had saved his brain from permanent destruction with $12.37 worth of aloe and mint. He would never know how close death had come. Victoria Sterling transformed her pharmaceutical empire from the inside out, redirecting billions toward accessible medicine that valued human lives over shareholder profits. The night a poor black teenager saved her son had fundamentally saved her soul. Dr. Johnson became medicine's fiercest advocate for recognizing genius wherever it appeared, teaching generations of doctors that sometimes the most revolutionary knowledge came from people society had written off as threats. Harold Washington transferred to Stanford campus security, telling colleagues he wanted to protect brilliance instead of profiling it. He'd learned that dangerous assumptions killed more people than brilliant teenagers ever would. Tommy still volunteered monthly at Mercy General's free clinic, the same waiting room with cracked plastic chairs where his journey began. He taught kids from forgotten neighborhoods that medical knowledge belonged to anyone brave enough to learn it, regardless of their zip code or bank account. Sometimes heroes don't wear pristine white coats purchased with privilege. They wear patched jackets held together with thread, love, and unbreakable determination. The boy society called dangerous became the man who revolutionized how we save lives. If this story reminded you that one person, no matter how young, how poor, how wrong they look to the world, can change everything, hit that like button. Subscribe if you believe in celebrating underdogs who refuse to accept that brilliance requires permission. And drop a comment telling us, who's the hero in your life that nobody else sees? Share this story with someone who needs to know their knowledge, their struggle, their love makes them powerful beyond measure. Because maybe, just maybe, we all have the power to save someone.